energy, anger and violence, clearly stealing our nights, feeling it tight between the shoulders with a chill in the spine, pinching myself, waking up, trying to stop the rewind and move forward towards stories, overcoming our fears, choosing love over hate, praying, trading hugs over tears. There's only one choice, breaking down the walls and repair every broken heart on this planet till there's no longer fear.
Walls can't hold us in. Fear can't keep us down. Love will rise again. Yeah, it's rising right now. We shall overcome.
Every time I think it's gonna take much.
Love will rise again.
Welcome everyone. You do have few prompts on the screen. Would love for you to go to the chat window, quickly introduce yourself, and we'll get started shortly.
Every time I think it's gonna take much longer, we shall overcome. Every time I question them, I getting stronger.
We have just begun.
Gonna make a change, we gotta push much farther.
We shall overcome.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. Young Gandhi couldn't fathom how to deal with himself when he was thrown off the train and the pain that he felt. Mrs. Parks disrespected, dragged into jail because of the color of her skin, organs, tissues, and cells. One day, a young girl was shot on a bus by a man, a terrorist, part of the Taliban. He said, "On this land, you have no right to stand for what you believe in. Girls have no chance here." Well, now, that's just the story of three souls who shook our planet after being down on their knees. And it's not gonna stop. Those seeds have now become trees, and as human beings, we'll keep on digging till we find peace.
Yeah, the cynics always say that nothing ever changes. The human nature's bound to stay the same. But it couldn't be more plain that violence never pays, injustice never stays. It's bound to fade away. What if history awaits? What if today's the day? We already know the way, so let's all lead the way. We shall overcome.
Every time I think it's gonna take much longer,
We shall overcome.
every time I question them, I getting stronger.
We have just begun.
Gonna make a change, we gotta push much farther.
We shall overcome.
We shall overcome. Come on now. Longer.
We shall overcome.
Every time I question them, I getting stronger.
We shall overcome someday.
'Cause I'm feeling it deep in my heart.
Deep in my heart.
I do believe.
I do believe.
I do believe.
We shall overcome someday.
Come on, put your hearts together. Here we go. Woo! I knew it. God had a plan for us to do it. To hit rock bottom before we rise and continue. To first learn greed before we learn to be human. To do wrong deeds before we learn to spread beauty. There's always a plan.
All right, we'll get started. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ashwath. I would love for each of you to actually go to the chat window, quickly introduce yourself, tell us what are you hoping to get from the space. Meanwhile, I'll also introduce myself. I've been with Teach for India for more than 11 years. I did my fellowship in 2012, where I had the opportunity to teach math for 120 students in Pune, which was absolutely a phenomenal experience for me, and I'm hoping for my students as well, all of whom are now in college, by the way. Post the fellowship, I had the opportunity to work with the government relations team in Teach for India, got the chance to work with projects at a local level, state level, and even at a central level. And post that, I led Teach for India's online teacher education platform called as Firki, which again gave us the opportunity to work with close to a few 100,000 educators across the country. And currently, I serve as one of the senior directors at Teach for India, leading a movement building work. So it gives me great pleasure to get started, kickstart a pathway exposure series that's been exclusively designed for y'all. Where today we are going to start off by looking at what are the careers that are there in the social sector. Post that, we will explore careers which are there in the education sector on 1st April, and following that on policy and governance on 8th April, right? We've got a really packed 60 minutes. I'm hoping, seeing there are more than 100 participants here, I'm hoping that we're going to keep it extremely snappy, extremely engaging as well. So these are few things for us to make sure the space is effective and efficient for all of us. We do have a space for Q&A towards the end. So until then, would request you to keep your mic off so that there's no cross noise that's coming in as our panelists are presenting and speaking. Please use the chat window, completely go crazy there, share your thoughts, what you resonate with, what kind of any questions that you have, and we'll be picking up and using that as a space, to facilitate your thoughts, your questions with the panelists and vice versa as well, right? As I mentioned, we do have quite a bunch that's packed in the 60 minutes. I'm going to start off with a quick framing of our alumni network and what the movement is doing today. Following which we have 3 fabulous alumni here who are going to serve as a window into the larger network to share about their stories, following which we'll have some time for Q&A and then close it out, right? So with that, with no further delay, let me get us started. So as most of you might know by now, Teach for India started in 2009. We started with 87 fellows. Today we have close to 1,000 fellows who are impacting 32,000 children. We started almost we started in 2 cities back in 2009, and today we are working across 8 cities in the country. While this has been Teach for India's growth over the last 13 years, we also had more than 4,100 alumni who've gone through the fellowship. And what you're seeing here on the screen is a quick heat map of where our alumni are present in the country. And of course, we have close to 600 of them who are outside the country. And if you're wondering, what are these folks doing today? They're spread across all the different sectors and different streams of life, right? So we have alumni working in top companies in the education sector, development sector, working closely with state and central government, even working with top companies in the corporate sector, and even the best of colleges in India and around the world. In fact, it's highly likely that if you're going to reach out to any of these companies or would like to know anything about these universities, the top universities, top companies, there's a higher chance of finding a TFI alumni there who's going to be there, who's probably had an experience, who's currently working there, who might be able to, share a lot about that. While this is happening on one hand, we've also had alumni who've founded their own organization. In fact, we'll be meeting one such alumni today in the panel conversation. And we have alumni working in the C-suite across several other organizations. So this is like a quick, overview of where our alumni are today and how we are spread geographically, what are the different companies and organizations they're part of, what have they founded, which organizations they're leading, and which universities they've graduated from. But to get a taste of this network, I would love to, invite 3 of our panelists today who are going to actually talk a little bit more about their experience, both during the fellowship and post the fellowship. We have 3 wonderful people here. We have Gurudat Ramachandra, who is currently the Manager Solutions for Argyam. We have Shruti who holds a special place in my heart because Shruti and I both started our fellowship together. In fact, we were part of the same team and continue to work as part of the same, what we call as learning circle, terminologies and jargon, which you'll come to know as you get into the fellowship over the 2 years. And we also have Shreya, who's working as a consultant with Sattva. What I'm going to do is, without wasting any further time, I'm going to request you, Guru, that if you can come off mute and you can share about your experience.
Sure. Yeah. Am I audible? Good. Hi, everyone. I'm Gurudat. Let me just pull out just a few slides while I keep talking so that all of you have an anchor to look at. Yeah, just let me know once that's up and then I can go. Is it visible?
Yep.
Okay, great. Yeah. So thanks, Ashwath. I talk about how my journey has been, right? And it is great to see so many people on the call today. I can imagine how it felt. Well, I was actually, I had my accept from Teach for India back in 2016. So I did my engineering and post that I worked as a decision scientist at a corporate firm called Mu Sigma for about 3 years, right? So I used to work on big data problem solving using data analytics, data visualization, and work with clients in the pharmaceutical industry, with cruises and whatnot, right? So that's how my career began, right? I was very happy with what I was doing. That was my first job after college. It was quite interesting, and I got a lot of opportunities to lead a team, to work with CXOs in other organizations, all of these people. While I really liked what I was doing, but it never felt like that was my passion, right? So for me, the journey into Teach for India was more to kind of explore to see if I can find what am I passionate about, right? So that's how it started. I hadn't heard about Teach for India. They just happened to have a lunchtime chat or a presentation at our office. I came across and then I was like, oh, this is an opportunity to try and explore. And then probably I can, if it doesn't work, I can always come back because I kind of established a career for myself in the decision sciences space. So that's how I kind of came about Teach for India and thought, okay, let me just do that. And my journey during the fellowship has been in terms of as exploratory as I wanted it to be, right? I brought the same kind of thought into my classroom. For me, more than anything else, I wanted my kids to get to get access and for them to explore multiple different facets in life, explore their interests and find different ways of learning and figure what is it that they're interested in, right? And whether it's music, whether it's art, whether it is sports, whether it is science, whether it's it could be anything else, right? So I was trying to bring that into my classroom, and that was how I kind of came about multiple different opportunities through the fellowship as well, right? So I worked in a government school. It kind of gave me an opportunity to see what is the need of the hour, right? So somebody had described very aptly, right, saying our classrooms in Teach for India are microcosms of the society. So you get to see exactly what happens in the larger society as well. And then that was the learning for me. Apart from the teaching experience, right? So the fellowship also gave me the opportunity to explore government relations, work with the block officers, with the district level officers, work with the city team on strategy, etc. Right? And also I was leading a project in Bangalore where we're trying to provide access to extracurricular activities to underserved children. So during the week I was teaching, during the weekends I was running this organization in the city itself. So it kind of gave me a lot of opportunity to explore multiple things. Through the whole experience, my learning was, one, I did not have it in me at the end of 2 years to say that I can continue as a teacher post the 2 years, right? Because I knew I'd committed to 2 years. I had to give my 100%, and beyond that, what it took to give excellent education to children, I knew I didn't have it in me. So therefore, it made it easy for me to think. Think of my career further, saying I don't want to be a teacher. In terms of the space that I wanted to continue, again, like I said, my approach towards education was slightly different. It was looking at extracurriculars, it was looking at art, it was looking at values, and not really aligned academically, right? So the conflict to say that, am I really preparing my children towards what they need to achieve through the formal education space? So therefore, for me, it was more about exploring how do you improve really the quality of life and stay in the development sector, right? And that's what I've been doing since since I completed my fellowship. So Teach for India and the other organization called Camp Diaries that I was leading in Bangalore, all of them kind of gave me examples of what is possible, right? So there were islands of excellences to show what can be done if you really put your minds at it. And post that, I wanted to see, is it possible to take this kind of excellence to every single person that actually needs, right? So I worked with Samagra, a governance consulting organization based in Delhi. I worked on a project on skilling and employment based in Haryana. I was stationed in the Chief Minister's office. And that kind of gave me an opportunity to understand, what does a state look like, right? I mean, how does the state think of implementing any scheme, any policy, any project, so that it reaches every single person that it's intended to, right? So how do you move the state machinery? How do you tweak different things within the state? How do you nudge them? What is the carrot and stick? How important technology is, how important monitoring and evaluation is, right? And how important reviews are. So that's the kind of learning that I had with Samagra while I was working with the state government there. Again, all of these opportunities were things that came about because I had access to the alumni network. I knew somebody who used to work with Samagra, somebody who knew of Samagra as well, right? All part of the Teach for India alumni network. Post Samagra, I wanted to move closer to home, that's Bangalore. So I was looking at opportunity to continue learning what does it take to work at scale, right? And like I said before, I really did not have a sector in mind, right? So I was looking at what does it take to improve quality of life, and that's what brought me to the place where I'm working currently, right? So here, more than anything else, the place I'm working at, Arghyam, is a philanthropic organization which works on achieving water security across rural India. Most of our work is through our partner organizations, partner NGOs that are working. We work with government. We also work with for-profit entities who come up with multiple solutions for water security. So the focus here primarily is in terms of scaling community-led outcomes, right? So my role here is to look at what does it take to reach population scale when we're looking at rural India, right? I mean, there are 6 lakh villages across India. So if there needs to be better water in terms of quality, in terms of access, in terms of the quantity as well, how do you reach all 6 lakh villages, right? Not look at 10 villages, 15 villages. And therefore, if we have to reach scale, can we look at designing differently, right? So instead of trying to scale what works, which most often fails, can we look at designing for scale, right? And keeping the community at the core of everything that we do. So that's the kind of role that I play. I work with partner organizations. I help design programs. I manage grants. There's a little bit of travel involved as well. And there's a lot of learning in terms of water security, in terms of the nexus with agriculture, skilling in terms of energy and whatnot, right? So in terms of the work that I do right now, I can think of 2 things that I really feel I benefited a lot through my fellowship experience. One is, of course, in terms of keeping the child at the center of everything that we do during the fellowship, right? So thinking with the perspective of the beneficiary or the end user, I think that's something that stayed throughout. And it really helps me now to put everything I do in perspective. Is this really going to help that first mile or the frontline worker that we're working with, or that this is intended to reach, right? So that's something that has strongly stayed with me throughout the fellowship. And the second thing, something that I want to reassure all of you is in terms of the power of the alumni network, right? So one of the things that gives me a lot of confidence is all it takes for me is to reach out and ask for help, right? There's always somebody within the network who's ready to help, or who knows somebody else who's ready to help and who can help, right? And that's kind of normalized asking for help, helping others, and making sure that we're all kind of achieving common outcomes, right? So in a job like mine, where we're a small team of 15 people and all our work is through partner organizations, it matters a lot that I know how to manage stakeholders, I know how to reach out to people, I know how to build a network. And that's what the confidence from Teach for India has kind of stayed with me. That's helping in my current role as well, right? I'm going to pause there. And if there are any questions later on, I'll be happy to help. All the best to all of you. Yeah.
Thank you, Guru. That really, it was wonderful listening to your journey through the fellowship and post the fellowship. Really resonate with the piece around, how the growing network is there everywhere and always somebody to reach out to help you as well. I think three big themes that really stood out from what you shared is this idea of self-exploration, both for you and for your students. There was this pursuit for this vision of excellence, again, for you and for your students. And the idea of focusing on holistic development. I'm sure we will have a lot more questions for you. I would request the participants to put down your questions for Guru in the chat window, and we'll come to that shortly. Our next panelist is Shruti Iyer. Shruti, over to you. For those of you who don't know, Shruti is the co-founder and CEO for the Foundation for Mother and Child Health. Over to you, Shruti.
Thanks, Ashwath. I'm also just quickly going to share a couple of slides. Just give me a second while I work this. Cool. So hi, everyone. And it's so nice to see 134 of you. I thought it's going to be like a small group of 15, 20 of us, but I did not expect this. But congratulations, firstly, on being accepted. And it's going to be really exciting for you. I'm so excited for all of you. I remember a few years back when I was here, 10 years back when I was here. So I am the CEO and co-founder of FMCH, Foundation for Mother and Child Health India. We work on maternal health and malnutrition. I'm going to talk a little bit about my organization and focus a lot more on my journey and how I got here. We essentially work in urban slums of India to ensure that families have access to the right kind of services during the first 1,000 days of the child's life, which is from the time the person is pregnant to the time the child is 2, because this is the most important time for the child, the mother and the child, because this is when maximum brain development happens for the child. And it's also super vulnerable for the mother because of her own health and the child's health. Malnutrition is a very complex issue, and India is one of those countries where, despite reaching food security, malnutrition still exists. And it makes me so angry that every single day you see there are kids dying because of malnutrition, and it's just preventable malnutrition, right? So that's what I'm working towards. I'm working towards building an India that's malnutrition free by ensuring that women everywhere have choice, voice, and access to the right kind of services. So I'm just going to quickly jump into my journey. So I, very similar to what Guru Dutt shared, I was in IT as well. I loved IT. I've done engineering. So for about 3 years, I worked with Infosys. So 2009 to about 12, I was with Infosys. That's not 10, it's 12. And then, as Ashwath said, both of us joined the fellowship together in 2012. When I joined the fellowship, I was very sure that I wanted to do education policy after this. But the fellowship really changed the way that I look at that I look at development. It was very honestly, I come from a fairly privileged background. It was probably one of the first times that that I went into a community which I was sort of which I grew alongside of, right? I did my fellowship in Pune. And over the 2 years, I realized a couple of things. One was that my strength lied a lot more in implementation. I came alive when I was on ground, when I was really understanding what's happening, how societies function, how systems function, how interdependent everything is. And I'm generally, I'm a very curious person, and that really, I think the fellowship filled a certain curiosity in me that I don't think would have been filled by any other way. Was that I continued to be in the education sector. I worked with Hippocampus Learning Centers. It's an organization based out of Bangalore that works with early childhood education. So I spent my late 20s in every village of Karnataka, setting up Anganwadi centers, training Anganwadi centers, setting up early childhood education centers. And it was just so much learning. I mean, rural is just a completely different ballgame. In 2016, I was also selected as an Acumen Fellow. And so I always say that I think both my fellowships were very pivotal moments for me. While Teach for India taught me the importance of groundwork and to think systems, to think about skills, etc. I think Acumen also gave me a lot of exposure to the idea that development is not isolated, right? There are a lot of intersectionalities. And I think I found my why through Acumen, which is the reason that I do what I do is I want to ensure women everywhere have choice, voice, agency. I realize that gender is very, very close to my heart. And at this point, that's what I wanted to, and that's what I want to continue to do. Post the Acumen Fellowship, I spent about 2 years doing various roles. I was consulting. I did a small gig with Teach for Bangladesh. I was the executive director at an organization called Mentor Me India. Post which I joined FMCH, Foundation for Mother and Child Health. When I joined FMCH, it was an organization that was about to close down. And I said, you know what, this looks very interesting. Let me go in there and see what we could do. I used, and over the last, so we were about 20 people in the team. Over the last 5 years now, we've grown to about 100 people. We use technology. Back then we were working only in Bombay, in the urban slums of Bombay. Right now we're in 3 states, starting a 4th state very soon. We work with government systems. We look at transforming the Anganwadi systems in various locations to ensure that families have sustainable sources of health services. And I'm very happy to talk a little more about my work. I think just in terms of how when I was thinking about it, I thought what would be most relevant. I think before I joined the fellowship, I was very, very anxious, and these were 3 things that my sort of my previous cohorts told me, and I feel like it's my responsibility to tell you guys this. Srini, who you will all hear about, told me this, that Teach for India is like a library. It's not like a restaurant, where you go order, this is what I want and this is what you'll get. No. Everything that you want is right there. You need to go pick up the book that you want, read it, write notes, and make sure you leave it back for somebody else to take it. And I remember Srini telling me this, and it didn't make any sense to me, right? But once you come in, and I see all the fellows over here smiling, so I know that they resonate with this. I think when you consider joining Teach for India, know that the ownership of learning is on you, and that's a very beautiful space to be, because nobody's going to drive you. You can do what you want. It's very entrepreneurial. You can really shine because it's as unstructured or structured as you want it to be, which is just very beautiful. The second thing that I would definitely want to just talk about, and I think, as Ashwath said, Ashwath also has a very special place in my heart because it's the same cohort and everything. The fellows, the alumni, the networks, they are going to be your go-to people. My best friend is from my fellowship year. And over the last 12 years, we've gone through a lot of ups and downs together. And I speak so fondly of both my closest friends are from the Fellows Network. And I think it's rare to find like a bunch of such passionate, authentic individuals. And also they really like to have fun. So I think that's just something that you should definitely, it's definitely a plus point. I don't think Teach for India markets it enough. And I definitely want to say that. And one thing that I would like to say specifically, if I had to go tell myself something, go back a couple of years and tell myself is don't stress about what next. I think I spent a large part of my fellowship just stressing about iske aage kya hoga, what am I going to do after the fellowship? I wish I hadn't done that. I wish I had spent more time just being there, just learning a lot more, being curious about what else can happen. But because I'll tell you what, right, there are so many opportunities and you continue to learn. Don't look at this Teach for India fellowship as, I finished the fellowship, I'm going to get a great job, etc., etc. Great if that happens to you. If that doesn't, it doesn't matter because something else will 100% happen to you. Like this network is super powerful. And not just a network, the experience is very powerful, right? So just come from a place of authenticity and really don't worry about what next. Like just be there for the work that you've come there to do. So that's the 4 slides that I have. And I'm just going to stop right now. And if there are any questions, I'm very happy to answer them.
Thanks, Shruti. We'll definitely come back to the questions. Love the last slide, the remember slide. I think it's extremely relevant. I think one of the things as you were sharing, which really struck a chord with me is when you spoke about how you looked at your education as privilege. In fact, it reminded me of what Gandhiji had said. While today I know education is a right, back then he said that one has to view one's education as a privilege. Because not everybody, gets the opportunity to have an education and even a fantastic education. And the only way one can deal with that privilege is to see how they can, apply that education back to the betterment of the society. And so seeing you, dedicate your time and effort to be in service of, the power of choice, voice, and agency for women, I think that's just fabulous. 2 themes that really stood out from what you spoke about is how, through the fellowship, while it filled curiosity, it also sparked curiosity. While it helped you get a grassroots experience, it also got you to look at systems thinking and how different pieces come together and different actors come together. There is a lot of comments for you coming in the chat window, so please have a look at it. Last but not the least, Shreya, I would love for you to also share your experience. There are people who are really excited to know more about consulting in the social space and specifically with Satwa.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ashwath. And I honestly can't smiling since the last 30 minutes, just hearing everyone's TFI journey, especially resonates so strongly with both Gurudat and Shruti. So thanks to both of them. And I'm also going to quickly pull up the presentation that I have. Right. Can you all see my screen? Yeah. Okay. Great. So, hey, everyone. Firstly, welcome to the Teach for India Fellowship. I am Shreya, and I was a 2015 Teach for India Fellow in Mumbai. I taught classes 2 and 3 in a municipal school in northwestern suburban Bombay. And you can see a picture of me with all my students and my co-fellow here on the left. So before I actually joined the fellowship, I studied economics at Jai Hind College in Mumbai. And you know how the typical economics route goes, so that you do economics and then you eventually get into some sort of the big 4, into some consulting, finance. That was what I was also thinking my future would look like. But as Shruti also mentioned, the Teach for India Fellowship was an absolute inflection point in my understanding of myself, my strengths, what I want to do, and also of the world at large. So right out of college, I thought that before I go more deeply into the economic sector and like development economics, which was something that I was interested in, it would be a good time to explore and get some ground, like experience. And that's why I joined Teach for India straight off the bat after college. So I was a very starry-eyed 21-year-old joining the fellowship who thought that I was going to change the world of like so many students during the fellowship. What did happen during the fellowship, I'm not sure if I've changed the lives of all the students, but my life definitely changed because of each and every student and each and every fellow alumni that I met during my fellowship. And I realized that during my fellowship, the students were spending about 5 to 6 hours in the classroom, and we were taught obviously during the institute time, where we were given training on how to be a good teacher. But I quickly realized that it's something that you're always going to learn day in and day out. So a lot of the skill set questions that were coming on the chat, I think if you go in with an open mind, there is no skill set that you will not be able to pick up during Teach for India, very honestly. But yeah, so after the fellowship, I continued to stay with Teach for India in the community and government relations, very similar to Ashwath. And I had the chance to work with 30 schools in Bombay. So what my role was that I was working with all the principals of the school in both municipal and some low-income private schools to see how we can establish a school development program. So it's not just the Teach for India students who are getting access to quality education that we want to provide them with, but it's also like the rest of the school and the rest of the students. We worked with the parents to, again, I think build their agency, build awareness in the parents to see how they can support their children at home. And lastly, we worked with community to see if we can bring in, again, some projects that can be community led, because students spend so much of the time in their communities. And the government relations part, I think something that I really enjoyed was just working at so many different levels in the system, right from working with a teacher and principal to the education officer, right up to the education officer in Mumbai BMC. So we would have long meetings with them where they would tell us their aspirations and took our opinions. So you can imagine, like, as a 23-year-old me sitting over there with someone with 40 years of experience in the education sector, asking what I thought would work in the education sector at large. So I think the 4 years that I spent at Teach for India, 2 in the fellowship and 2 after the fellowship in the staff role, made me realize that my time at basically Teach for India taught me a lot about a very specific context, which is the urban classroom context. But as soon as I was, talking to more people, I realized that I don't know a lot about the education sector. I don't know any theory that is there. I don't know what it looks like to sort of, as Guru that said, that like scaling something that is working. I didn't know how to do that, and that prompted me to apply for my master's, which I did at the Institute of Education at University College London. Something that I was very cognizant of is that I came from a very privileged background to be able to access the education I had and the education that I was accessing at UCL. So I was very cognizant of what it is that I wanted to study. So even the modules I chose were very specific, that, okay, if I've learned 3 things at Teach for India, what are the other 3 things that I think might help me serve the sector and serve the country, and I chose those modules very specifically, which were very hard skills of like planning, which were hard skills of like being able to create theory of change for an organization, monitoring and evaluation. So all of these things, which I got a glimpse of during my Teach for India fellowship, but something that I learned very specifically. Unfortunately, I graduated in the pandemic year, and I came back to India, which is something that I always wanted to do. But I think the at that point of time, a lot of decisions that were being made were very specific to what was helping during COVID. And because there was no implementation as such happening on ground, I joined Lead School, which is an edtech organization, and I worked in the curriculum development team. So what really helped is that it was something that I'd never done before. So I was really curious to learn and apply my skills over there. And because there was also a time when nothing was happening as such in the school and no like direct implementation was happening on the ground, I thought it would be a good time to explore more on the design part of things. After about 2 years at Lead, I joined Satva, where I work as a consultant. So yeah, I'll talk a little bit about Satva. So Satva is a social sector consulting organization. I'm sure many folks have heard about business consulting, management consulting. What Satva does is Satva works with governments, with foundations, with social enterprises, and lastly, with corporates who are our clients, and we solve with our clients their problems. And it is any problem that the client wants us to solve. So it could be designing a program for them, it could be monitoring and evaluation, it could be thinking about what their organizational strategy for the next 5 years, 10 years could be. What is at the heart of Satva is that it only works in the social sector. So we will not be working on management consulting, let's say, for a very strong for-profit organization. So corporate CSR sustainability is something that we work with. And at the crux of what we do, there's a lot of collaboration. So at no point does Satva think that Satva alone can solve any of the problems that are there. So it's a lot to do with like, okay, if this is what we know, and this is what we've learned from our past, how can we really leverage the other folks in the ecosystem to really help and bring impact at scale? Because just the problems that are there in our country require every single solution to be implemented at scale. So that is what Satva does. So a little bit more about my role at Satva. So I work as a consultant in the nonprofit advisory team, and I don't work necessarily only on education projects. I work at the intersection of various thematic areas. It could be health, it could be education, it could be environment, agriculture. So whatever our clients are and whatever work they want us to do, we help them with like tools and frameworks that we have. So what you can see on the screen are just like a couple of things that we help organizations with, just org strategy, design, collaborative orchestration, research, etc. I think I really want to spend more time on yeah, I'm going to stop sharing my screen because I think what I wanted to spend some time on is how the fellowship has really helped me work at Satva. So I think that at that point of time when I was in the fellowship, I didn't think of those skills or what I was learning as something that I'm going to, oh, this is something that's going to help me do this role, or this is something that's going to help me with something else. But it was just everyday part of the experience. My role every day is to work right now at Satva is to work with people. And I think stakeholder engagement and stakeholder management is Teach for India Fellows' bread and butter. You're working with students, you're working with teachers, you're working with principals, you're working with parents of the students, you're working with BMC officials and like municipal corporation officials and so many other people. I think you will work with anybody you need to work with to get what your students need. And I think that really helped me build my ability to talk to people across the board, to be able to engage with them and to influence them in a way that's going to be helpful for everybody. So that's definitely something that I learned at Teach for India, and I cannot stress how important it has been across all the jobs, across all my time after Teach for India. Something else that two things that I learned at TFI, which I know might be like the bane of your existence at Teach for India while you're there at the fellowship, is one, planning, and two, reflection. You're going to hear these two words so very often at Teach for India, but trust me, they are so helpful. Right now, anything that I work on, I'm able to break it down to first principles and think, okay, what is the end goal of it? What do we want the end result of it? And how can I plan backwards from there? And every day when you work on a lesson plan, you know what you want your students to learn, and then you'll backtrack from there. So it's just such an easy thing to learn at Teach for India because you're doing it at a student level, but imagining taking that same framework and applying to how an organization can achieve its goals. So that's one thing. Reflection, you will hear so much about that as well. Just reflecting on what went well, what did not go well, and that really strengthens your ability to go the next day and do better than what you had, let's say, today. And I think just the last bit, I think I also saw one question about case studies, right? Like how can someone prepare and what skills you need? And I think at the crux of all case studies and consulting is problem solving and critical thinking. That you need to be able to look at a problem and really break it down into multiple smaller problems that you can really attack and solve one piece at a time, although not in silos. And I think what Teach for India, the fellowship, really helped me do is that no 2 days in the fellowship looked the same. So every day there was one new problem that was coming, and it wasn't like a problem that was like earth shattering, but it was a problem, right? Like even a student not being able to learn addition was the biggest problem of my life on a particular day during my fellowship. So to be able to really go back and think as to what's the crux of the problem, what is the root of the problem, and what are the different ways to really tackle it were some of the things that I see a very direct connection that I have to my current role and what I did at Teach for India. But I think overall, I really resonate with Shruti that really don't worry about what comes after the fellowship, because what you have coming are 2 really, really like beautiful years of your life in the fellowship. You're going to make incredible bonds with the students, with the fellows. Like just as Shruti said, I'm going out for dinner after this with my co-fellow whom you saw in the picture that I just shared. So it's just like very lifelong bonds that you'll be able to create at Teach for India. And I'm very excited for all of you. So yeah, thank you so much.
It's wonderful, Shreya. Thank you for sharing that with so much enthusiasm. I mean, really what stood out, from what you had shared is, that quote which says it takes a village to raise a child. When you spoke about working with teachers, parents, commissioner, the administrative officials, also really resonated with the skills that you gained through the fellowship that allowed you to pursue not just your masters, but even work with org strategy, including reflective practice, right? But what really stood out as common among all 3 of you is just the opportunity or the blessing to work with such complex pieces, right? Things that have not been solved for decades, not just in India, but across different countries and regions in this world. And being able to, spend your time and be in service to something that would better that cause, better the society. I think that's what really stood out. But I also want to make sure that this space is going to be something which everybody gets everything. So I'm going to start off with my first question to Gurudat, but Shreya, Shruti, Kaveri, Pragya, Smriti, Shweta, I request you all to go to the chat window. There are a lot of questions that have been addressed to you. If you can start meanwhile quickly typing, responding to people, maybe sharing few links which might be useful for them, right? And in that process, we'll also come to questions specific for you as well. What Kaveri is also doing, folks, is she's making a list of all the questions that are there in the chat window. We'll put it in a document. We'll make sure we'll circulate it with the panelists so that they're able to respond to those questions and share it back with you. So in case your questions are not answered in the next 13 minutes, please be assured that, it is going to come your way. And of course, the 2023 cohort who are joining us today, you will have a direct hotline to each one of these folks and the entire network few months from now. So don't worry about that at all. So Gurudat, let me start off with you while everybody else is responding to the questions in the chat window there. Gurudat, if you could talk a little bit more about, just what kind of skills, mindset did the fellowship really, develop for you, which still stays today? And also what structures or what spaces really enable the development of those skills and mindsets?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Ashwat. So I think the first skill I'd like to talk about is in terms of networking, right? I think there was a question on the chat as well around it. So one, in terms of the spaces, right? I'll probably talk about the spaces and the kind of development and skill that has happened over the period of 2 years. right from the institute during our training, right? So right from then, there's always opportunities for us, just like this one, right? To interact with people who've done the fellowship or who are within the network, outside of the network, who are doing great things. I remember our interaction with this person named Arvind Sharma, if I'm getting his name right, who make toys out of everyday things that you find. So it started off there, right? And I was immediately thinking, how can I use this in my classroom, right? I'm going to go into my classroom, which is resource crunch. I don't have resources. I've left my job. I'm going to get a very small stipend. So if I want these kind of exposure, how do I get it, right? So the opportunity to know that, oh, there is somebody like this who's done that. There are YouTube videos, I can directly reach out to him or somebody else, right? So it started off right there. When we came back into the cities, I think the learning circles that are there with the peers, the other fellows in our cluster, right? Where everybody is talking about the work that they are doing, how the kind of help that they're getting from their program managers or from people outside of the fellows and their program manager itself, right? So those were some of the things. Apart from that, I think personal connects help quite a bit. So talking about the why, right? I think one of the things Teach for India helped throughout is in terms of refining or understanding my own why of why I'm doing the fellowship, or what am I trying to do every day, right? So because I was able to get that clarity over time, my conversations with my network as well, whether it is friends, whether it is family, anybody I met. So even if I took my kids out on exposure visits, let's say we took a metro ride, went to the Kabban Park in Bangalore, or did anything, just because of the kind of interactions I would be having with the children, there would be multiple people interested in coming and talking to us about it, right? So their interactions with the kids, their interaction with me, I was able to have those conversations, and we were even able to get CSR funding for our school. We were able to get people come and volunteer in our school just because of these conversations we've had, right? So it was not really a concerted effort saying, this is what I'm going to do, this is how I'm going to build a network. But I think every single opportunity that the fellowship gave kind of helped build that. But apart from that, I think having conversations with the leadership within the team, and sharing what is it that you're looking for. So my journey has been throughout, even if you talk to people that I work with, so they probably still tell you how I was exploring multiple things and wanting to do different things, especially with the government, right? So every opportunity that came up, whether it was interaction with the block education officer, whether it was interaction with the district head of public instruction, or a strategy interaction within the city, speaking to the board of directors or advisory board within the city, the leadership would remember and make sure that I was part of those conversations or point me towards that, right? I think the ownership, I think like Shruti was mentioning earlier, was really in terms of staying true to yourself, right? Knowing this is what you're there to do and having those conversations with people. So then everybody is ready to help and put in that time to do that, right? That's how it's kind of helped build that. I hope that answers the question now.
Thanks, Guru. That's definitely, it helps to get insights into how it has enabled for you and what really was enabled as well. You do have few questions that are specifically targeted towards you. While I go to Shruti next, would request you to go to the chat window and see if you can find them and respond to them. Shruti, you spoke about, finding your best friends, finding that kind of support in the fellowship. I'm really curious to know, how do you really leverage this network today, professionally and personally, right? You've started something new, you've gone through different experiences. Of course, you're also part of the Acumen network, but just bringing it back to Teach for India, the 4,100 such individuals everywhere in the country and outside as well. How do you really leverage this network?
Yeah, I think I owe this network a lot. So as I think it's I'm also very, very, again, I'm going to say this again, that I'm very privileged to have been a part of this network. And I think the work that I do, I'm able to do this because I have, in many ways, the connections that I do, right? So whether it is reaching out to somebody saying that, listen, I need connects to a CSR donor, because there's so many other entrepreneurs in this network. So, just like a message to Santosh, or, we've got a couple of them who are always there to help out, telling them, I need to connect to this particular donor, or, somebody else over here, etc. Definitely connects. The second is because I work a lot with the government system. We work in remote areas. We want to keep our costs low. Collaborate, yeah. We collaborate like nobody's business, no? So looking at also as an NGO, you'll have to collaborate. You can't do everything. You don't have the money. So then look at who are the other people. The minute somebody says, "Oh, I'm a Teach for India fellow," there's this instant trust that's built. You're like, this is common vocabulary that sort of comes, right? So then you're like, so it's easier to collaborate in that way. And I think definitely one of the biggest ways that I leverage the network is to build my team. The talent that comes out of Teach for India, oh my God, amazing. So I'm constantly always looking for, so I also saw somebody on the chat said they're interested in malnutrition. So very few people who actually are working in this space, and this is great talent, right? The Teach for India folks, they're just great at planning, strategy, can look at things big picture, have worked on the ground, good at training, etc., etc. Like, what would it take for them to go into various other spaces? So I'm always looking for folks to hire from the Teach for India network. So yeah, I think so. Then looking for funding, definitely reach out to the networks, looking for collaboration with other NGOs. Like, you'll always find people. And the third is talent.
All three very important factors.
Yeah, and of course, and I love all of you. So we all get to hang out together, which is also great.
Thank you for plugging that in the end. Okay. In fact, I think there are people who also wanted to know a little bit more about Anganwadi. Shruti, if you can, take the time to respond in the chat, else we'll create this document, send it to you all, make sure you all have the time to respond to these questions, and then we'll share it back with these participants as well. Shreya, we're almost out of time there, so would request you to keep it a little bit snappy if you don't mind. Shreya, if you could just talk about two big things, right? Just bringing it back home. What was your primary motivation to not just to join the fellowship? So not just apply, but once you've got the offer, what really said, you know what, I'm going to take this leap of faith. I'm going to join Institute and take the 2 years to do this.
Yeah. So I knew somebody who was a 2012 fellow, and I saw his life change completely. I knew him before the fellowship and after the fellowship. And I think for me, seeing his transformation, and not just in terms of, what he did, but also the kind of person he became, more empathetic, more reflective, more aware of a lot of things, and the way he conducted himself just made me realize that that is something that an ordinary job like that can't do that. And like, I also had I had an offer from KPMG because I was doing I was doing economics. I had these two offers at the same time, but honestly I also thought that I'm not getting any younger, and if it is the time to do something like the fellowship, this is the best time to do it. And I really thought that, from getting the accept to actually joining the fellowship was just more to do with going to school. We went to school before joining the fellowship, talking to other fellows, seeing what their journeys have been like was a very strong motivator.
Got it. Well, KPMG is great. +1 to TFI there to
for
have
sure.
you here. I think that's wonderful what you shared, right, Shreya? I think it's very similar to what, today the 2023 cohort is thinking about, right? How do you kind of understand, either through talking to existing fellows or alumni, visiting classrooms, being part of such spaces, right? I know we are almost out of time, but just to kind of bring it all back together, each of you had an opportunity to almost have like a TikTok level or YouTube Shorts level interaction with 3 of these amazing people. But of course, there's going to be a lot more. But to just summarize a lot about what's really enabled them in the fellowship, right? Like through the fellowship, there are n number of opportunities that are present. Of course, Institute is where everything gets kickstarted. Your ability to be a fantastic teacher, your ability to discover your leadership, your ability to network, your ability to be a reflective practitioner, and so on. But post that, there are several opportunities where, for example, personal theory of change, where you really discover what your passion is, what your calling is, what is your leadership development style. You have city conferences and org immersions, which allows you to network with individuals, understand the entire landscape of education and beyond, which is there. You have the Get Set Connect series, which really focuses on you as an individual, helps you build your resume, helps you build your TFI story narrative, prepares you through mock interviews. You have Be the Change projects. If you have that entrepreneurial bug in you, it allows you to explore projects that, sooner or later kind of becomes your passion or spins off its own entity. There are different tracks. Some of you spoke about governance. There are public sector tracks. There are tracks on exploring education. There's tracks on entrepreneurship. There's different tracks and internship opportunities that allows you to, say, what is it that you want to really do post your 2 years? But apart from all of that, 3 things that really make sure that you find that space post that fellowship is you have an organization fair that allows you to actually interact with organizations such as what Gurudat, Shruti, Shreya mentioned, right? You get to meet these folks, explore the interact with their leadership team, experience their org culture, experience what are the complex problems they're working towards. You have a career fair, much like what you would have had in colleges, which allows you to apply for different positions, go through that process, get those offers. And beyond that, once all of that is done, there is a strong support system that you still have 100 days post the fellowship. I know some of you might be wondering, yeah, Shreya, Shruti, Guru, that I didn't have all of this. Yes, a lot more is added from when you and I have completed the fellowship, but I just wanted to share that as well. So with that, I know we are at time, but what would really help us close this space is if you could take a minute to really share what's your biggest takeaway from the last 60 minutes, especially listening to Shreya, Shruti, and Guru, that like, what is one thing that's really sticking with you, that's staying with you? What is one thing you're really looking forward to? Kaveri, is there a Padlet link that you can share in the chat window? Use that link to share your takeaways. Meanwhile, what we'll also do is, I know there are a lot of unanswered questions. We'll make sure we are saving this chat, copying these questions, sharing these questions, which are specifically targeted for Shreya, Shruti, and Gurudat, so that they can share their responses and then share it back with you. So we make sure that all of this is there. All of this time that you spent here listening to them is not just listening, but you've got your questions answered as well, even if it's not done in this 60 minutes. Yeah, thanks, Isha. Don't overthink, just go for it. Just put down what's really stood out for you in the last 60 minutes. We'll take a minute for that, and then we'll close out the space. And those of you who've already taken the time to fill the Padlet, just keep this in your calendar. We were there today we started the Pathway Exposure series by exploring careers in the social sector. Of course, we just spoke to 3 alumni, 3 fabulous individuals who very openly, with a lot of energy and enthusiasm, have shared their experience, what they're doing currently as well. Post which, on 1st of April, we are going to explore what is it to build a career in the education sector. And post that, on 8th April, we are going to explore what it is to build a career in policy and governance. So just stay tuned for this. All of these are efforts to give you better clarity, in joining the fellowship and knowing what you want to do post that as well. But I'll go back to Shruti's remember slide, which ends with, don't worry, there's time and space for everything, and sooner or later you will discover this. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Shreya. Thanks, Shruti. Thanks, Gurudat. Thanks so much for taking the time. Really appreciate you doing this on a Saturday evening for us.
Thank you so much. This was
And
wonderful.
for each other, if I have to capture the spirit of what you really spoke.
Thank you.
Those of you who are still there, please click on the Padlet link. We are pasting it on the chat window again for you. Make sure you're filling in your takeaway and then you're exiting the call. don't forget to do that before you leave. Be really helpful for us in our future sessions. Kaveri, maybe in the document, we can also share the LinkedIn handles of our panelists. So if any of the participants want to reach out to them, post this directly, they can do that as well.
We'll totally do that, Ashwat.
Yeah.
Thank you. I see a lot of people still on the Padlet and so many more reflections, which is great. Huge thank you to you, Ashwat, for just hosting this space and seeing people immersed in thoughts, and also responding on the chat privately with their questions and queries. Folks know that I'm making a note of all these questions, and we'll try to get each of these questions answered if they're very specific to one panelist or even generic. Would love if you put down your takeaways on the Padlet. And we will see you next Saturday at 6:30 for their careers in the education sector space. Thank you so much, folks.